Hello and welcome to the Blockade Runner podcast number 231. My name is John, and joining me tonight is Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Hello.
We've been away a little longer than planned, I think. And so Ryan, I don't know what's happened is 3 episodes, an entire arc of Andor has gone by, and we have not recorded. Um, However, one sort of nice benefit of that situation is that we're recording on a Wednesday night. So the most
Mm-hmm.
recent episode of Andor, The Eye, just released this morning. And generally, we're like 3 or 4 days after it comes out, and then we record a podcast, and it takes me another day or two to get it up when I remember to edit it and post it. And so we should be a little more timely this time around if you pretend that we're only covering The Eye and not the other 2 episodes, which are weeks old at this point.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay.
But
Uh,
I think, I think this is kind of cool in a way because we can approach it as like a trilogy because
yeah.
now we've seen all of the parts of this particular arc, which is obviously part of a larger arc, but like this felt like a trilogy of episodes with a singular vision.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Absolutely, and that is sort of um, a nice result or a nice kind of effect or whatever of us not recording for a while. We get to talk about this entire trilogy of episodes, and there's certain things from episode 4 and 5 that are more meaningful now that we've seen episode 6, etc. So we can have a more complete discussion, and that's definitely good. Um, I don't really want to like I don't think I'm going to want to wait every time 3 weeks to talk about these
Mm.
episodes,
Mm-hmm.
but because circumstances aligned in this way, that's how we're going to do it this time around. So this entire episode will be devoted to discussing these 3 episodes of Andor, episode 4, 5, and 6. So number 4 was called Aldani, 5 is called The Axe Forgets, and 6 is called The Eye. All 3 of them are written by Dan Gilroy, Tony Gilroy's brother, and all 3 of them are directed by Susanna White. And so this sort of seems to be kind of the vibe for um, the show. The first 3 episodes are written by Tony Gilroy. They were directed by Toby Haynes. Like I said, these 3 were Dan Gilroy and Susanna White as director. What is interesting, though, is like looking at the information I have in front of me. The 7th episode is written by Stephen Schiff and directed by Benjamin Caron. And then there's 3 episodes after that directed by Bo Willman. I'm sorry, written by Bo Williman and directed by Toby Haynes. And then 2 more after that written by Tony Gilroy and directed by Benjamin Caron. So essentially what I'm trying to say here is it does look like we have another trilogy of episodes for 8, 9, and 10, but maybe next week's episode is going to be like the outlier in terms of this structure. So next week's episode is kind of maybe an outlier. Then we get 3 more, and then we get like a 2-part finale or something like that is what it's looking like based on who's attached as far as writing and directing is concerned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, man, sold that. Like you just knew it. You just knew all that. I only know it because I'm looking at it right now. I didn't know that. You got that memorized, Ryan? You knew all that?
I I think, obviously this is common knowledge for anyone uh right now. No, I think I think it's a cool approach. And yeah, there's, it's not going like it's not some like rigid thing where it's like everyone does a trilogy. Um like that's the only way we can tell these stories because there are some, like you were saying, like outliers. Um but yeah, I think like that's again like it's the thing I've continued to kind of say about this show. Like they just seem to have the freedom to deliver their vision in the way however it seems fit for them,
Yeah.
and they're not being like held to like, well, Mandalorian did this, so like you need to do this. Like
Mm.
this is just the approach they're taking, and I think that rules. And I think we are absolutely reaping the benefits as viewers, as Star Wars fans, um, you know, watching this show, and we are seeing the benefits of that freedom. And and the creative team's sing- singular vision.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because these 3 episodes are absolutely fantastic. We were
Hmm.
falling all over ourselves about how great the first 3 episodes were, especially after that third one concluded and wrapped up that 3 episode
Hmm.
arc, which is where we're at today after seeing the eye. But man, these next 3 episodes just as strong, if not stronger, and
Hmm.
it's so wild to see this show being just like outrageously high quality. Um, and like you said, it feels like it has this singular vision. These 3 episodes feel like a little movie. The previous 3 felt
Hmm.
like a little movie. But yeah, it's wild. It's certainly wild. So let's
Yeah.
get into talking about these 3 episodes. Uh,
Hmm.
Part of the whole 3 episode arc thing is that like these 3 episodes, for the most part, the a plot or whatever you want to call it, sort of takes place in one location, right? It's on Aldani with a group of characters that it's following. We were introduced to Mon Mothma in this set of episodes, and so there's a little bit of Coruscant, and there's a little bit of we were introduced to Deidre as well, and we do
Hmm.
spend some time following uh, Cyril Karn. Is that his name? I think it's Cyril Karn, right?
Hmm.
We spent some time with him too, also on Coruscant. But I guess my point here is that the vast majority of these episodes, oh, and Luthen too, Luthen, you know what I mean? We
Hmm.
follow him also, but the vast majority of these episodes is on Aldani with Cassian and this crew of characters, and there are really memorable, important characters who I think are coming back in the show that were in the first 3 episodes that we haven't seen at all. Like they just have not been part of this at all. Almost like they're not in this movie. They were in the last movie, and maybe they'll come back for another movie. But right now, they're not present anymore. Um, it totally works for me, and I think it's a really interesting approach. But it's certainly different than most episodic television. Um, at least like Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett or that sort of thing. Um, Although I guess
Hmm.
Book of Boba Fett wasn't afraid to completely abandon certain characters for certain episodes, but you know what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was both really intriguing to realize like by the end of that fourth episode and especially into the fifth, like okay, yeah, we're here on Aldani. That's where we're gonna be. That was really interesting to
Hmm.
realize, and it also makes me super curious. Like, where are we going next? What's going to be the next kind
Hmm.
of arc of these episodes?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like high level, the the A plot, as you say, um, isn't terribly unique to Star Wars. It is, rebels infiltrating Imperial facilities in some capacity. It's literally like a story that we had in A New Hope, we had in The Last Jedi, we've had in like Mandalorian, like we've had Rebels, like it's this type of story we've had so many times. And I think in a lot of cases, like it would be like easy to be kind of dismissive of this, and I think I probably like have been before, of like, oh, we're doing an infiltration mission, we're gonna walk through hallways and people are gonna pretend that they're Imperials. Like that's not anything new, and it's generally not like terribly interesting or like um too like exciting, or it can occasionally be tense, but it like generally is kind of whatever. But I think it is like a testament to just the absurd level of quality of pacing, direction, music, performances, dialogue, everything, that it feels different here. Like the way this played out felt, it was surprising. It was like uncomfortable, as we'll probably get to, especially like, the first 2 episodes of this arc kind of build to the infiltration mission, and then when it actually happens, like it there were like parts that I was like seriously uncomfortable during. And I think you felt the you felt the tension. And I think the biggest thing with this show is there's a certain thrill to the knowing the stakes are so high, and like they're just really well communicated. Like, stakes are always high in Star Wars, like it's because it's like this very exaggerated thing where it's like, well, yeah, if we don't, blow up this spaceship, then like the bad guy's just going to take over the universe. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
And, but like here, the stakes feel high because you are slowly but surely getting attached to these characters. And like, you know that, I mean, that many of them are not going to make it out of this situation, and there's like definitely some foreshadowing that just like made like my stomach drop when I was like, oh god, there, that something bad could happen to this character. And then like, like basically, based on the pedigree of Tony Gilroy and like his work on Rogue One, that you know it's not, no one's a guarantee to like come out of things alive, and no one's a guarantee to come out of things as a hero.
Mm. So a couple things on that. One thing you mentioned is like we've seen a lot of these hallway infiltration things and undercover missions and stuff like that, and they're rarely this tense and this powerful and this effective. I think a huge part of that, and I guess it's sort of an obvious thing to say, but a huge part of that is the fact that like generally that's you know, one act of a larger movie, or it might be, one episode of a TV show, or it's 20 minutes of, like in The Last Jedi, which I think is very effective. Like I like that sequence a lot in The Last Jedi, and I think there's some tension
Mm-hmm.
in it and stuff. But like when Rose and Finn are sneaking onto that, Star Destroyer or whatever, it's just a small portion of the story. It's a small portion of what's happening or whatever. Here, it's what 2.5 hours plus probably. Really,
Mm-hmm.
almost all of it spent just on this mission. We take 2.5 episodes of planning and discussing and building and all that stuff
Mm-hmm.
to get to that moment. And you're right that with Tony Gilroy at the helm and just with the show being what it is, um, we know that a lot of these characters are they have the potential to die, and
Mm-hmm.
that certainly happens in the eye. Right, we lose, um, I guess, two members of the team for sure. Right, in
Mm-hmm.
Terramin, I think is his name, and Nemec both die. In that
Mm-hmm.
episode. So like yeah, we definitely well actually now that I say that, Terramin, Nemec, and then also Skeen, right? So three members of that team. What was it?
Mm-hmm.
6 people total? Maybe 7. So like, a good chunk of that team dies. So yeah, like that's always on the table. And increasingly and more obviously it's gonna be on the table, right? Just because like we've already this body count is rising as the show, goes here. But anyway, long story short, what I'm trying to say is that yes, it was tense because we know people can die, but I think it was just tense because we know how much it matters to all of them. Like it could
Mm-hmm.
be that nobody died, or I wasn't even afraid that somebody was going to die necessarily. But it's just like they have so much riding on it. We've spent so much time building up. Like these characters care about this. They've been planning for 6 months. Like they're freaking out about every little detail. It's so important to them, um,
Mm-hmm.
that I think we just feel the importance and the weight of it. And it's like even if they had all escaped alive, and even if they had gotten that money out of there, I still would have been like nervous the whole time, um, just because it matters so much to them. So I think that's
Mm-hmm.
uh, another way in which the show is really different is that it is taking so much time and slowing down and spending time in these little moments, and really giving us a look at the day to day of these people's lives that like you know anything is high stakes, right? Like um,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's a different kind of storytelling. Will they get that promotion at work? Like what's happening in their relationship? Like
Mm-hmm.
little things can have huge stakes when you tell a
Mm-hmm.
story in a way where you're focusing on people and the moments of their lives. And so I think the tension is in the execution, the storytelling, but also in the character building and the pacing of the show, and the fear of losing characters. Like all of that stuff comes together
Mm-hmm.
to build this really kind of powerful climactic episode here, which is very similar to the third episode of the show also. So yeah. And I guess one more thing before we maybe move on to other topics. uh i
Mm-hmm.
I know we talked about this personally. I don't think we talked about it on the show. And I'll have to paraphrase because I don't remember the quote exactly, but I've been using this quote whenever people are a little hesitant about the show or not sure if they want to watch it or not. It's like, oh, I've heard it's slow paced or whatever. Great quote from Tony Gilroy saying, you can't cash a check if you haven't made any deposits or if you haven't put anything in the bank, right? So
Mm-hmm.
um, both of these 3 episode arcs have been such a great example of how when you take the time to build that equity, um, the payoff is just that much more powerful. So
Mm-hmm.
uh,
It,
yeah, it's great.
and that's, I mean, that's also like a huge risk that the creators are taking, because like I've watched slow paced shows and movies before that don't have the payoff, or they have the payoff that like they think the audience wants, and then I'm just kind of like, okay. um I think this also happens a lot in like horror movies, where it's like the curse of like the horror movie that's like 3/4 of the way great. Like the first like hour and 20 minutes is so tense, so amazing, and then and it's such a slow burn, and then like it just falls apart at the end. And like for whatever reason, there's so many reasons why that can happen. Um and I think if they weren't consistently sticking the landings and making it like, oh, I understand why like the story's told that way, because like just being slow paced isn't like necessarily good or bad. It's like what you how intentional you are with what you're communicating through that pace, and then like what is your like end vision for
Yeah,
it. And if it builds up to something that's, you know I satisfying is probably not the right word, because I think, you know that's kind of like a loaded term, I think. And I think people have like different definitions of like what that means and what that feels like. But for me, it feels like it just feels like a well told story. I think I feel like I learn, like, one, I'm entertained. Like I am, again, we talked about this the last time we recorded. Like it is a show that like makes it hard for me to pick up my phone. I was like, I know we got to record today, so I need to take some notes. I never wanted to like pick up my phone. I was
yeah,
like, I have to type this in my notes doc real quick. I'm just gonna put like a few words because I don't want to look away.
yeah,
And that's so rare for me
yeah.
these days.
Oh, it's
But
super. Oh, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, like, the show is satisfying to me because I'm entertained, and I feel like I'm I understand something better than I did at the beginning. And I understand the characters better, and um I and I feel something.
Mm,
I This episode was like emotional for me in ways that I did not expect from this show. And it didn't feel like manipulative. It wasn't like, you know, playing on like any nostalgia I had or anything like that. It was just sincere character drama,
yeah,
and just fantastically executed.
yeah. I want to kind of move into talking about the specifics of the plot and the characters and things here in a
Hmm.
second, but I just want to point out that, like, I think I use the term slow paced, But in some ways, like I don't even think that's fair necessarily to the show. It takes its time,
Mhm.
but like if when I think of the scenes as they play out in the show, I actually feel like they're really tightly packed with extremely precise dialogue that is concise and precise. Like it accomplishes a ton. And there's like no wasted moment, and it's not like dilly dallying. You know, it's not just like wasting time
Mhm.
or being slow for the sake of being slow. In fact, I think it's like I've watched every episode twice now, including today's episode. I ended up watching it again this
Mm.
afternoon, um, and every time I watch for a second time, I'm like picking up new things that I hadn't picked up before. And yeah, I think it's pretty dense in terms of the amount of ideas that are. Well, I don't. Excuse me. I don't even know if that's the right way to phrase it. Dense, but it's there's certainly plenty going on there, and I think it's accomplishing it with brevity. So even though it's taking its time, it's not wasting time. And I think that every line of dialogue, every scene, every moment of the show is accomplishing quite a lot, and doing it fairly quickly. Unlike myself right now, but accomplishing a lot, doing it pretty quickly, and also sowing seeds for things that are going to pay off later on that you may not recognize right away. But then there were lines that from episode 5 that were, I was like understanding like, oh, okay, so it meant what it meant in that moment in episode 5, but it's also paying dividends again now in this episode. And it's a lot of that kind of thing going on. So I think there are
Mhm.
shows out there and movies that are more self-indulgent and uh less efficient than this one. I don't think it's really slow paced.
Mhm.
It's a different kind of pace. It's one that uh, insists on spending time with characters, but that time is really well used, I think. So I don't think slow is even the right way to put it.
Yeah. And I think, like, again, going back to something we said, just kind of as we're talking in like in general terms, about about the show, and we will get into details eventually. But
Gushing really is
um,
what we're doing, but yeah.
yeah, it's really hard not to. But I think, it's something we talked about on the last episode. Is like, again, this is a show that just it respects the audience so much, and you honestly, like, you as an audience member, you get what you put in. Like, I think if you are just watching like eagle-eyed, like, you're not going it's not like it's full of like Easter eggs or something. Like, there's I don't know, maybe there's like references to the holiday special or the Ewoks cartoon or something in there, but like, really, what you're if you're watching really closely with like a lot of scrutiny, like, you are getting so much from the performances and the, again, just facial expressions, tone, like the actual words they say, what is in between the lines of the dialogue.
Yeah. Um, I guess I'm keeping us general for another second, but I listened to um, Tony Gilroy on the Mark Maron podcast last week, and that was
Mm,
super super compelling, really interesting. The majority of the episode was not about Star Wars, and it was pretty clear that Mark Maron, while he may respect Star Wars or whatever, is not like a Star Wars guy. So he was way more excited to talk to
mm,
Tony Gilroy about all the other stuff that Tony Gilroy has done. But they did spend 15 to 20 minutes on Star Wars, and one thing that became clear, which I loved. It's fine if this didn't turn out to be the case, but it made me happy to hear Tony Gilroy definitely knows Star Wars. He may only know it now because he's been working on the show so long and because of
mhm,
Rogue One and now Andor, but he definitely knows Star Wars, at least a lot more than I think the Star Wars fan, kind of community or world or whatever kind of gives him credit for,
mhm,
or had been giving him credit for, and largely based on comments he had made that seemed kind of dismissive or whatever. But point is,
mhm,
he definitely kind of knows Star Wars. And one of the comments he made was like how fantastic it is to be able to have like such a rich world and rich kind of mythology and tapestry to be able to use, and to be able to kind of place his story in. he was talking about how it's an honor to, have this kind of 5 year period that he's able to kind of establish. But within that, he's able to kind of do what he wants, like you were talking about the freedom that it seems like these creators have. And he definitely kind of expressed that idea. It's like, okay, well, this is a little corner and he gets to spend all this time developing it. And I think because of the kind of writer that he is and storyteller that he is, it's not like, oh, cool, like I can do, um, 2 hours on this, period of time or whatever. No, he's digging in and really spending
Mhm.
time and really exploring and really building out. But as he's doing that, like, I don't know. I mean, I don't see Easter eggs in this show necessarily, but in Luthen's art gallery, there's like all kinds of like references to other things. Apparently, Indiana Jones's whip is in carbonite in Luthen's. You know, I think that's probably the
Okay.
most extreme example. I forget
Mhm.
where I saw that, but like that's the most extreme example, and it's a tiny little thing, right? And I doubt Tony Gilroy wrote that in the script or that was his idea, but there's references to Mimban. There's references.
Yeah.
I texted you guys. I was like going
Mhm.
nuts because like somehow I watched. I can't remember if it was the fourth episode or the fifth episode of Andor. And Mon Mothma is talking about some bad. I forget even which one it is now or whatever because I'm not good with this kind of stuff. But she's talking about this um, this culture, this moment, this battle, whatever it was. And it's the same. And then later that day, Elliot and I are watching Rebels season 3, and Mon Mothma is on screen, and she mentions the same event. And I'm like, oh my god,
Mhm.
man, this stuff is tied together. And yeah, Tony Gilroy, like, I mean, obviously he's got people probably like Pablo Hidalgo and others helping him with these kinds of details, or just sort of being the
Mhm.
experts. But this is not. I don't know. I think like after the first week, we had kind of talked, and a lot of people were sort of talking like, "Oh, this show's like barely Star Wars, and this show's not concerned with like Star Wars lore and stuff like that." Um, I don't think it's concerned with it, but I think it's happy to be part of it, and I think it is. I anticipate a little more of that going forward. I think it'll always be more subtle, and I think it'll always be um, used in significant ways and necessary ways. But like, yeah, I don't know. This is not a show that's it's trying to distance itself from Star Wars in a way that we may have thought right away, in my opinion. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was great to listen to Tony Gilroy talk about it and hear that, like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm doing my thing, man. I get to make my Star Wars show. I'm doing my thing, but also hear him
Mhm.
talking to somebody who doesn't even care about Star Wars and like really talking about it in a way where you could tell he had this appreciation and excitement about being able to work in Star Wars. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I think this episode in particular, this episode 6 really to me felt it felt like the best feelings I get from Star Wars, and this is like a really hard thing to quantify because there is always that question of like what exactly makes Star Wars, and I think we've especially in the Disney era, um I think that question has been like beaten to death, and it turns out no one actually has an answer. And uh the the I think I think thematically this episode was the most like overtly Star Wars to me, and I think it's thematic feelings, which is like because I don't even know if it was like the intentions of the writing team or Tony Gilroy or whatever to like evoke these feelings, but for me, I think there's a reoccurring theme within Star Wars is obviously, you know, fighting oppressors. And I think this episode really, which the whole series has done, it like really kind of like stamped in like the, the Empire as oppressors. Like they don't care about people, they don't care about cultures, like they care about control, ownership, profit, that sort of thing. And it really gave like um a complex face to the quote unquote evil empire. And so I think that was kind of like a general obvious part of it. Um, I think there was also I think there's a complex hero's journey happening here with um with Cassian, who's going through multiple stages of the hero's journey in order, out of order, going, reverting back, moving forward, jumping a step, going back two steps. He's having a journey, for sure. But and he's doing the learning part, learning about his place in the galaxy, learning about who he is, what his values are, all of that. And then I think there's another equally complex, kind of recurring theme in Star Wars, which is found family. And I think this is, there's no shortage of Star Wars with like, hey, this is a found family and it's a little dysfunctional, but everyone still like loves each other in the end. I think there is a found family story here, but it's like, what if you find a family and it like doesn't work?
Hmm.
Like, what if your found family isn't the right family for you, or you aren't realizing it at this point in your journey?
All right, so I find that super interesting. Let's talk about that because um, I assume the found family you're referring to is this crew on Aldani that
Mm-hmm.
Cassian is thrust into sort of last minute, right? That crew, and obviously, like in some ways, it doesn't work, right? Although, I mean, honestly, like in most ways, it does because they pull off their mission. Um, Terramin dies, and that sucks, right? Terramin dies.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a failure of that family, right? And everybody else, and Nemec dies also, which is tragic. I mean, both of
Mm-hmm.
those deaths are tragic, but we spend more time with Nemec and we spend more time on his death too. Um, but I guess ultimately there are sacrifices made, tragic outcomes, but it's only Skeen who kind of turns out to like really not work as part of that family.
Mm-hmm.
And the irony of that is that, the question was always like, will Cassian prove to be loyal? Will Cassian fit in? Will Cassian be part of this found family? He does. And I think he passes that test, or however you want to put it. Like, we can talk about that because his choice at the end of the eye is complex and it's interesting for sure. And there's, I think,
Mm-hmm.
different ways to interpret it, and different ways to interpret specific components of the choices he makes there. But anyway, that's a found family, and I think it does function for the most part. But what's really intriguing about it is how it's really just a branch of a larger family tree of this nascent rebellion that's developing,
Mm-hmm.
and how will it fit kind of into that? And I think that's definitely part of Cassian's journey, or the question around Cassian is like, we know he's going to end up back as part of that rebellion. So how's he going to, kind of factor into that? Will this family kind of come back together? I'm really curious
Mm-hmm.
about this. How does Bix come back into this story?
Mm-hmm.
How do Vale and Cinta, is it Cinta, I think?
Mm-hmm.
And how do they come back into this? How do they all kind of come back together? What about Lieutenant Gorn? He survived, right? And what's going on with Cinta? She's just there on the planet. So like, I just have all these questions about like how this is all going to play out. But I think eventually this small kind of found family, it's this little found family for this arc, but it's got to become part. I think it's got to become part of a bigger sort of, maybe it's a stretch to call it a bigger family or a bigger found family, but it's got to become part of a bigger uh, team and a bigger push and a bigger organization, right? And that it's going to be thrilling to see kind of how that all plays out.
Yeah. Yep. And just again, like, now that we're talking about families, like, going back to stakes, I think, like, obviously death is a stake in something that has wars in its title, but also just the way relationships are tested and formed and broken. And I mean, again, just in this like sixth episode is just relationship wise between the characters, the things you like learn about them and see how their trust is either gained or lost, or um you know made stronger or tested or ended on uncertain terms. Like those are like also stakes. And I mean, I think in like broad strokes we call them like emotional stakes, but like it's I mean, it's relationship stakes, and that's all kind of playing into this like larger um, story of like connections and com- complicated unification of people with, um, you know, very different investments in the cause and in each other and the galaxy, and how do these people make it work, and do they make it work? Like, I mean, for all we know, like through this show, like Cassian could just wander until and like his real final arc is in Rogue One.
Okay,
And yeah.
no, I was just gonna, let's talk about Cassian and like his
Hmm.
journey, um, and sort of trace it a little bit over the three episodes, because like the the fourth episode, which is just called Aldani, I think, right? Is that what it's called? Yeah, Aldani. The fourth episode, Aldani. It kind of opens up with Luthen. I mean, first they're in the ship, and then Luthen drops him off as part of this team. But Luthen's like, "Well, you could try to kill me and take my ship." Obviously he doesn't do that. Drops him off in the
Hmm.
team, and Cassian is, I mean, one, he's says he's doing it primarily only for money, and the team doesn't really trust him, and he doesn't trust them, and he's very angry, and it's a very difficult sort of process. But as the fifth episode, the Axe Forgets develops, it's clear that like he's developing relationships with these people, becoming a little more, kind of part of it. I think it's the fifth episode that ends with them talking about, maybe it's the fourth episode. I don't know. One of the episodes ends with them saying like, "Okay, so are you in? Or are you going to do this or whatever?" And he's like, "Let's do it." Like they give him the opportunity to sort of, all along he'll say, I'm here for the money. I'm doing it for the money, whatever. But there's clearly, as the arc develops here, this 3 episode arc develops, he's becoming more and more engaged or um, connected to this mission, and actually cares about the mission itself and the people who are carrying it out, to the point where by the end of the last episode, the Eye, episode 6, it's Cassian who kind of overrides Vale and says, "No, we're taking Nemec to the doctor," and it's Cassian
Hmm.
who kills Skeen, I think, because number one, he can't trust Skeen, right? Once Skeen says like, "Hey, like let's steal this money and take it from these people and all this stuff," at that point, I think it's evident like you can't trust him. Um, and you can't trust him not to kill you in your sleep or whatever else, right? I think Skeen's a real threat to him at that point, which mirrors
Hmm.
the opening scene of the show when he has to kill that other guy who's basically a threat to him, right? I'll always be in danger with this guy around. um and maybe that's the justification for him killing him. But I also think part of it is anger or betrayal, because it's like, we believe in this cause and you're ready to sell it out. You're ready to take this money and
Hmm.
run. You're ready to leave Vale here. You're ready to ditch this cause and these people. And I think he's outraged and feels betrayed by that. And you can't be outraged and betrayed by that if you don't care about those things and you're not on board. So I just think like over the
Hmm.
course of this 3 episode arc, we're really seeing him becoming that much more invested in all of this. And like, yeah, it ends with him killing some dude, not in cold blood, but killing a dude, like straight up like murdering him. you know
Hmm.
I guess it's cold. Is it cold blood? Nah, it's not in the back, right? I think anyway, whatever, he kills the guy. And that's not a good thing to do. But I still almost feel like that's a hot takes here, it's not a good thing to kill people, but like
Yeah.
I almost feel like it is a step forward in his hero's journey. um not because he ended some guy's life, but because like it shows how much he's beginning to care. Not even beginning to care is not the right way to put it, but how much he's willing to kind of invest in this rebellion. And it's not about the money because he doesn't take the money, right? You know, he gives the Kyber necklace back to Vale and he says, I'm only taking what I was told I would be paid. And it's a tiny, tiny fraction of what's sitting in that ship, which he could have taken off with. What are there, 80
Mm-hmm.
million credits? I think that's what they said, 80 million credits. And he's taking,
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what the number is, 50,000, 200,000. It's something like that.
30,000 or
It,
something. Yeah.
yeah, it's so small. It's such a minuscule
Mm-hmm.
amount. So yeah, I mean, the guy is, he's invested. And excuse me, um, just while we're talking about that final scene, the fact that he's given, reluctantly takes Nemec's manifesto, that is,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Oh.
I mean, it's emotional or whatever, but it's like, okay, this guy now has an actual item. He has the words, he has the
Mm-hmm.
beliefs of Nemec, who put it all out on the line and sacrificed it for this mission, for this rebellion. He's got that with him. He can't run away from that. I mean, he could leave it somewhere or whatever, ignore it, but like that's going to be a constant
Mm-hmm.
reminder of, you know, the fact that people really believe in this. Um, and I think he's starting to really believe in it, and that's only going to probably strengthen his belief when he starts to look through that manifesto from Nemec as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think God, just the amount of like super powerful scenes in like in surprising scenes in like the last like 10 minutes of that episode, like when they're like just at the doctor, um I think like it was like I was like having trouble reading the skiing scene initially, um because like again, this is like one of those things where I'm just like the the cliche like glued to the screen. Like I'm like literally watching Skeen's face as he's telling this, and I'm thinking, okay, is this a test for Andor here? Like, is he serious about this stuff? Like, is this, you know, just another thing where he's, you know, trying to feel out Andor? Because there's been a lot of that already, and like, is he really lying? Is he telling the truth about lying? Is he lying about lying? Like there's just these characters are so, I mean, they're not, I don't even want to say like complex characters, which like they are, but like it's so much more than that because they have all these things happening within them, but they have to live so guarded and can only convey like such, like everyone is a threat to them because what they're doing is the most like illegal punishable thing you can possibly do in this galaxy. And like, yeah, like the empire is like lazy and, you know, they don't believe these, you know, that they're threatened, but they also like they have a ridiculous like we've seen this like a ridiculous intelligence department, and you know they are like rooting out spies and all of this, like, so they do, people do have to be like so guarded and have to like be so careful about what they say and like what they reveal, and like everyone's lying in some capacity in this show. But I don't think it's like it's all, I don't think it's all malicious lying. And so like there was like moments where I was like ready to give Skeen the benefit of the doubt in this situation and be like, okay, well he's just, you know, he's just keeping his people safe here.
In
Like,
the scene, you're saying specifically in
yeah,
that scene at the end.
yeah. And then like it eventually takes the turn where you're like, oh wait, he's serious about this. Like, oh, this is who he is. And then you're like, how do you respond to this? Like, what does Andor do? And then, like, I don't know. Like, I was like, I don't have a better idea than what you just did, which was just shooting this dude. Like, what do you do in that situation? And like,
Well, I
whoops,
mean,
now
he's a
you've just created a bigger problem for yourself too.
um maybe, maybe, um yeah, maybe, I guess so, because how does he convince Bale
Hmm.
that he didn't just kill Skeen for malicious reasons? I mean, he does convince her. I think he does convince her because when she gives him that
You
manifesto when
think
he's
so?
leaving, yes, I do, because of the act, because of the
Mm,
performance of the character, or the actor, I should say.
mm,
She, the tone of her voice, the way she was looking at him, everything, like the level of anger that she had towards Cassian in the first half of that scene was really palpable. And then in the second
hmm.
half of the scene, once he was like, "I'm only taking 30,000 credits. You can have this thing, the necklace, um, the kyber crystal." Um, Luthen tells him, "Don't take less than 50,000 credits for it."
Yeah.
I think he was being paid 200,000. I think so. I'm trying to remember because I know that the
Okay.
amount for the necklace is not. I don't think it was enough to pay like what he was going to be paid. But regardless, um,
Hmm.
he gives that back to her, like, and he says, "I'm only taking X amount of credits, and I'm leaving. You should get out of here and take the rest of that 80 million credits, whatever." Right? Like,
Yeah.
I think in that moment she realizes like that doesn't. Why would he kill Skeen? And then let us keep all this. It doesn't, there's really like no reason, right? But
Hmm.
without him making that gesture, that really kind of proves he didn't kill Skeen because he was, his plan all along has been to, kind of take advantage of them, screw them over, whatever. Like that was never what he was intending to do. But how do you prove that without, kind of making the sacrifice, or maybe a sacrifice isn't the right way to put it, but how do you prove that without demonstrating, proving I'm not taking your $80 million or your 80 million credits? I'm not doing that. That's the only
Hmm.
way to really prove it. So if he had killed Skeen and then he was like, "Hey Val, I killed Skeen because he wasn't loyal to the rebellion, but I want to be loyal to the rebellion. Let's finish this mission." Why would Val trust him? Why would Val believe him? You know what I mean? So yeah,
Hmm.
I guess you said he did create it, as you said, he created a bigger problem for himself, but really Skeen created a problem because what are you going to do? Like, arrest him? Go tell Val like
Yeah.
Skeen said he wants to take this money. Like Skeen's gonna say, "No, I didn't." I mean, like there's really, it's a tough situation. Um, and now Skeen has seen his face. Skeen knows about the other people in the rebellion. Skeen has information, and he's clearly not trustworthy with that information. So how can you let him live? If you, especially if you operate under the code of morality that Cassian operates under, how can you let him live? So there's that one thing. Excuse me. One thing about that scene that I wanted to point out too, and this is probably nothing, but like I was thinking about it this morning as I was getting ready for work, and because I woke up at 5 a.m. and watched it like always. But as I was thinking about this, I was getting ready for work. Castine's like, "Well, what about your brother?" And Skeen, I'm trying to remember exactly what he says. Does he say, "I don't have a brother"? He either says, "I don't have a brother," or he says, "I never had a brother." I think he might
Yeah.
say, "I don't have a brother." And I just like, that's another example of how I think this writing is so good. And it's probably just me reading something into it that's not there. But I thought about that and I was like, okay, he could have said, "I made that story up about my brother," or "I was lying about my brother." But he says, "I don't
Hmm.
have a brother." And I'm like, okay, so that is open to interpretation to a certain extent. Like, is he saying, "I made that story up and I lied about it"? Or is he saying, "I don't have a brother because the Empire killed my brother, and so I don't make decisions based on my brother anymore because this world just steps on your neck, and all you can possibly do is climb over someone to get what you to get out of it or whatever." And
Hmm.
again, that line is probably not really meant to be interpreted that way. I think I'm probably doing that. I'm an English teacher. I'm probably doing that thing where I'm like looking for like meaning that isn't actually there necessarily. But I don't know, because I think like, damn, that's pretty
Hmm.
good. If Dan Gilroy's writing this and wants to leave a little ambiguity to it, where you are asking yourself, wait, is Skeen a liar? Was he lying the whole time, or is Skeen someone who has just been taught by the universe, by the world? You always have to look out for yourself first. And I'm even so hardened by all of this that like, yeah, my brother's dead. Okay, I don't have a brother. You know what I mean? That's not what motivates me anymore. That's
Mm,
I can't take that into consideration anymore. You know what I mean?
mm,
So I don't know. And there's all kinds of moments in this show where I feel like the writing, the dialogue, the statements that these characters are making are really rich in that way.
mhm.
Probably in a more concrete way than that. That's a little abstract, or maybe I'm reaching for something that's not quite there. But I do think it's that kind of writing where you can kind of look into it that way in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I mean, and again, like I was saying, like no one is telling the full truth on this show. Like there's and I think like in maybe like a more straightforward story, like if you're lying, you're doing a bad thing, and you're either a good person who did a bad thing, or you're a bad person who just does bad things. And I think these are like the our heroes are liars in this
Hmm.
story. And I think that's just like such a fascinating thing. And I think also like what's kind of great about it is I think the show and the creators have, I don't think their intention is to ever be like, all right, here's the season finale. Find out what parts are totally true, and
Right.
like and we're going to explain everything, and like, just check off all these boxes of things you were wondering about. Like, I think we're just going to have to sit in like this murky ambiguity and like gray area with these characters, and I don't know, and just that's where this show takes place.
Yeah, and another moment from that Mark Maron podcast where I was like fist pumping, and just like so impressed by Tony Gilroy. You said a second ago, our heroes are liars, right? I think that's what you said. The
Hmm.
heroes in the show, they're liars. Um, One thing that he said, he wasn't even talking about Andor, but he was just talking about writing in general. He said something like, total empathy for every character you write is the golden rule of writing, or something like that. And it was Mark. I think Mark Maron was asking him something about like, maybe you write villains that people can relate to, or the villains are 3 dimensional, and sometimes you want to root for the villains. It was something like that, and he said, well, total empathy, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm almost sure he said total empathy for every character you write. That's the rule. That's the standard. That's what you have to do. And
Mm,
watching the show, that's absolutely there. Um,
yeah.
Deidre, like, dude, sometimes, like in
Oh
that
yeah.
situation where she gets talked down to by the other, I mean, I'm like,
Hmm.
no, like this is, she's the hero in this moment, right? And I relate to her. Even Cyril Karn, the guy's there's a lot of ways I could refer to him that are not a complimentary, but at the same time, like,
Hmm.
he's such a rich character. Like, I feel like I want to get to know that person more. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
I understand what motivates that person. I don't want him to win, but I understand what motivates him, and I view
Yeah.
him as a real person. There are some cartoonish villains in this episode a little bit, I guess,
Yeah.
that I don't really, I have to, as I was like, oh, total empathy every character, I was like, oh wait, but the guy with the kids and the wife, and I don't really empathize with that guy too much.
The sergeant.
Yeah, he dies of a heart attack, and I was like, oh man, he gone, sucks to be you. I was not like,
Yeah.
I didn't have any real empathy for that guy, but for the most part, that is the case. Like, Tony Gilroy writes, I feel like it's written like every character is, and this is a cliche, and you hear it all the time, but every
Hmm.
character in this show is the hero of their story. You know what I mean? And so
Yes.
like Cyril and Deidre and, um,
Hmm.
you know, ooh, you know who else I don't empathize with?
Hmm.
Mon Mothma's husband.
Ooh.
I don't have total empathy for that guy. He
Yeah.
sucks, but no, I think like
Yeah.
the characters that matter, right? Like the primary characters, the important characters, even
Hmm.
if they're bad guys, they're still written in a way where like I can understand their motivations, or I can kind of like I can see them as real people with real emotions and real feelings and real motivations. And you know um yeah, I don't think that's usually the way genre fiction is written, and genre TV and stuff is written, right? Like, we don't necessarily probably try that hard to make the villains um feel so real a lot of times.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. And again, like it's another cliche, but like the line between hero and villain is blurry in this show. Cuz like you have a scene I mentioned earlier about like hey, this show made me uncomfortable at times like this episode. You have a scene where our, our heroes like kidnap a dude's family and they're like we probably won't kill them, but we might kill them. Uh, and so then you have this situation where you're like, okay, this dude, the dad, the sergeant, like completely unlikable, like horrible person. Like just his, like his beliefs, the way he treats others, like the way he carries himself, just completely unlikable. And again, yeah, like I'm kind of with you. Like I didn't have empathy with him in the same way I did like Deidre or like Cyril. Um, it, but like then you get to a point where where he's like, please just let these people have what they want so that they don't kill my family. And you're like, I don't even know how I should feel right now. Like I'm feeling a
Yeah.
lot of things right here. And that's incredible. I think like that's really just rich storytelling to like, just again, like the viewer is such an active participant in this show where like you are just being like it's like impossible to just like passively view the show, at least for me. Because like I like just comparing it to like other things like other things like I'm watching right now. Like I watch Rings of Power, which I think is a good show. And I watch it every week, like within 24 hours of the episodes coming out. That's a show where I feel like completely passive, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just watching this thing, and like I'm invested, like I'm watching it weekly, and I care, but like I'm not like navigating complex moral dilemmas in my brain like at 5:30 in the morning where I'm like I don't know how I should feel right now. And like I'm, that sort of thing. Like this is just at like such a I don't know. It's just like such masterful execution of storytelling. I'm belaboring that point, but like that scene in particular was just so powerful.
Well, so on the note, you were one of the comments you made a minute ago there, you said like something along the lines of like, there's this gray area in this show because like you do like the characters are so well written and everything. It's like the lines are blurred. I think you said something like that, right? Bad guys,
Hmm.
good guys, etc. The lines are blurred. I know what you mean and I agree. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking like, okay, so Star Wars always does this thing where like the bad guy's super bad, but then like on the turn of a dime they have like whatever redemption arc and like it's cool because it's
Hmm.
like it's hopeful and it's positive and it's mythic, you know what I mean? And so I don't want
Hmm.
to like I love that stuff and I love it in the original trilogy. I love it in the sequel trilogy. I love it in Star Wars Rebels with Hot Callus, becoming a good guy and
Hmm.
stuff. Like it
Yeah.
happens all the time, right? But
Chops.
like Callus is so like it's not really a gray area situation too much until I mean there is the episode where he and Zeb are on that planet together and that's but anyway, point is
Hmm.
usually they're super bad until they're not anymore. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
it's very archetypal. But like I think
Hmm.
with this show, I'm really curious to see it. I feel like it could definitely go either way. But I almost feel like the fact that we're willing to depict the villains as more empathetic's not the right word, but just more whole and more real and more human, and less
Hmm.
cartoonishly evil and all that kind of stuff. Like it almost makes me feel like it will be the opposite of the kind of standard Star Wars storytelling where it's like, oh, they'll, nobody's going to say the line got, well, they would. I don't know. But anyway, the point is like, instead of having this guy's been real bad all along and now he turns good, it's like, no, the bad guy
Hmm.
is a bad guy. And like, they're they're but they're a bad guy that's super compelling and super human, not because their humanity is like admirable, but because they have a rich, they're richly depicted. They have emotions, they have motivations. You can see how
Mm-hmm.
their interior life is operating, right? Like that kind of thing. Like almost be like
Mm-hmm.
depicting the villains or whatever, the bad guys that way, almost would potentially like negate the need to have them like do the face turn, and have that
Mm-hmm.
moment where they do the baby face run in and save one of the good guys, or you almost don't need to do that, because
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the lines are blurred. But with the lines being blurred, I just feel like maybe we don't have to move the chess pieces to different sides of the board and do that kind of cliche stuff, in this style of storytelling.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be as binary.
Yeah.
And I think like we I was thinking about all these examples like that you were just like listing, and I was like, yeah, okay, I guess that like does happen a lot in Star Wars. But I think of like the moments where like there are moments where I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I feel some complexity here." And I think of course, both of the moments that immediately spring to mind for me were from The Last
The
Jedi.
Last Jedi,
And
yeah.
yep. And so, I mean, I guess three moments, because like you've got like the grumpy Luke, and you're like, that's not right. Um like, but like I don't think that's like the big one. I mean, it's like the big one, but it's not the main one that like, because I knew Luke was going to come around. Like,
Sure.
I just knew it. Like,
Yeah.
the first time I watched that movie. But I think in The Last Jedi, DJ is maybe the closest thing to like um
Yeah. To these
the like
characters, right? So the way the
yeah,
characters are
to
depicted
like
in the show. Yeah.
an Andor
Yeah.
character.
Yep. Yep.
And but I I will also I love DJ. He's one of my favorite performances in the sequel trilogy. Um but I don't think I think like his dialogue is so good. Like I use gifs of him all the time.
I was gonna say,
Um
usually if we're having an argument over text message, you like to do the mic drop with the DJ maybe gif. You know what I mean?
the maybe. I love
Which
the
is like,
maybe.
that's the
Like,
most dismissive. Like, I'm done talking to you. Like, bitch. Like, maybe. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
that's
no,
like,
I don't mean it like that when I use it. I mean it like, you know, maybe that's true. Like, but we're never
with
going
those
to like
eyebrows
find an
raised
answer.
sky high though, like they were right there. But
Yeah,
okay. All right.
we're
Okay.
we're never going to like find a clear cut answer
All
to
right.
this.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
Um,
Right. Right.
and I, but I also think like, you think of like the throne room scene, where that was like, I think the like where I was like the most emotionally, that may be like the first time I watched The Last Jedi. That might be the most emotionally invested I've ever been in Star Wars, where I think I like stopped breathing during that scene. And like the moment where like Ray is like, "Wait, what? We just had this thing, and like, what are you doing?" Like,
Don't go this
yeah,
way. Yeah.
yeah, and you're like, "Oh god, I thought for a second that like the thing was going to happen, but oh god, now it's not happening." Like, yeah, I think like that feeling, again, talking about like what I mentioned earlier, like thematic feelings that that Andor evokes, like I was like kind of getting similar feelings to like that scene, in just like these character interactions and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, for sure. All right, so let's talk about some of the other like kind of key components, I guess, of this arc. We
Mhm.
haven't talked about Luthen. Luthen rules,
Oh my
and
god.
he was awesome in
Yeah.
the third episode of the show too. But I believe it's the fourth episode where we see. I think it's at the end of the fourth episode where we see him kind of go from Luthen on the ship, to putting the wig on and putting the different
Hmm.
clothing on and kind of standing there and doing that moment where he's like, doing the thing with his hands and all of that. And wow, like it's so good. Um, yeah, the performance from Stellan Skarsgård is fantastic, and just there's a similar moment in this episode when he's doing the whole like fake Luthen thing, up front talking to a customer, and then the guy brings up Aldani, and he has to like excuse himself and go to the other room and just start smiling and like laughing, and it's like you see that
Mm-hmm.
mask drop again. I
Mm-hmm.
guess earlier you kind of saw him put it on, but yeah, it's such a well depicted character.
Yeah, incredible. And like, yeah, I think like having it's just the little things like you were saying, like, and I didn't even like think of this because I haven't had time to like process the trilogy in like trilogy form.
Uh-huh.
um but like, yeah, the fourth episode he puts the mask on. The sixth episode ends with him the mask coming off. Like,
Yeah,
just just a cool just a cool little touch.
like a book ending. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not like he stays only with the mask on the whole time, right? Because he talks to Mon Mothma in that back room, and like,
Right.
there's a moment where he's talking. I don't know if that assistant are they like together or are they not? I can't tell.
I Yeah. I
Because
Okay.
like the conversation is sort of like, oh well, are you going to bed, or like, I'll be ready in the morning, and like all this stuff, and it's like, I don't know. They're either, I mean, they're definitely like super tight knit partners, but I don't know if they're.
Mhm. If it's just professional, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think yeah, there is a few relationships in this show. Like, it's not um there is much like everything in this show, the romantic relationships are complex, and we saw that obviously with Bix and what was that dude's name?
I forget his name now.
Yeah.
We
But
R.I.P. But
yeah. Yeah,
um,
like they had a complex relationship that like that was like the most overt one, but then there's also like these implications about Bix and Cassian that they like had a relationship. Um I think some Vel and Cinta.
yeah,
Um
that's I think for sure a thing.
yeah. Um and then like, yeah, like seeing them have just a like romantic moment like makes me think back to when Cassian was first coming onto the scene with that group, and like and Skeen was like talking about Cinta, and he's like, don't get any ideas, she's already sharing a bed. um
No, she's sharing a blanket, and then you
sh-
immediately see
sh-
Vale walk out with a blanket over her shoulders. So
oh, seriously?
yeah.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
That's
Well, I didn't I did I've only watched the
I didn't catch
episodes
that until
once
my
each.
yeah, I caught that on my second viewing. I mean, I kind of knew like what the implication was, but like I caught it on my second viewing
Mm,
that the cue is there. And then there's like
wow.
multiple moments like Vale is definitely jealous of Cassian and like the time Cassian spends with Cinta, or like feels like threatened by that. Um, there's multiple
Wow.
moments like she tells him, yeah, I would be too if Diego Luna was talking to my lady, you know what I mean? But like she tells him
Hmm.
like don't get distracted. Like all he's just like handing the like flask to her, and Val like comes and stands in between them and says like don't get distracted to him. And I don't know, like she snaps at him like at one point she's like it's a Skeen like I don't know, does something, messes with him, or they have like a little argument, and then she gets Skeen out of there, and then she snaps at Cassian and she's like, and you can dress yourself, because Cinta was like helping him get ready or whatever. So like yeah, there's multiple moments where
Oh,
Vale is
wow.
not comfortable with Cinta and Cassian spending time together. So
Okay. Those Yeah, this is going to be such a fascinating series to like rewatch.
mm,
Like with,
yeah.
knowing things that we do now. Wow. I didn't realize all those pieces were there. But that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about Mon Mothma. because Mon Mothma, like
Mm-hmm.
every time I see her um on screen again in these episodes, I'm like, oh yes, we're getting more Mon Mothma, because we don't get a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
everything is super fascinating. Like just
Mm-hmm.
like in the fourth episode, there's the scene where she comes home and her husband, who is awful, is like and setting up the dinner with the whoever they are that are like helping starve the Gormans with that blockade, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
um she's like, they had that argument, and it's so it's so good. Kevin, the day that episode came out, I was talking to him at lunch, and he pointed out the fantastic line when she's walking away, and the husband is like, "Must everything be so boring and sad?" But like she had just got
Mm-hmm.
done saying to him, "Oh, cool, yeah, we'll just hobnob and laugh and joke around with your rich friends at this dinner, or our rich friends, because I'm pretty sure Mon Mothma's like super rich too. But like, we'll just hobnob and
Mm-hmm.
laugh and like, what does she say? Like, they'll starve. We can talk about how they're starving the Gormans over our third course or whatever it is, you know. And his reaction is to be like, "Oh, well, must everything be so boring and sad?" And it's like, God, you
Oh,
suck, dude.
just
He sucks.
insufferable.
But
Yeah, like
Kevin pointed out, because that is an insufferable line, and the dude is insufferable, and he has a awful haircut, and he just sucks. But
yeah.
Kevin pointed
Mm-hmm.
out that like in that interaction and the interaction that you see with her daughter in the next episode, that both of those moments are, even if that guy sucks and he's awful, it's really dedicate or it's demonstrating that like her dedication to the cause is something that's taking her away from her family, making her family feel
Mm-hmm.
resentful, making her family feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's no time for them. Because as much as that guy is an asshole, him being like, "Must everything be so boring and sad?" I think another way to read that line, um, and this time I think it absolutely is there, and I'm not reaching for it. Another way to read that line is like, there's no time for us to like have fun. There's no time for us to be
Mm-hmm.
happy together, because your whole life is this other thing that you won't even really tell me about. Because like that dude can't be
Mm-hmm.
trusted with that information. Oh my god, no way.
Yeah.
So he doesn't even know what she's spending her life dedicated to, but he knows it's not him, you know. And that's
Mm-hmm.
such an interesting thing.
It is. And like in that's again, it's like I think this is one of those times where like it's just it's honestly hard for like I guess like going back to like what Tony Gilroy was saying, like eh, feeling empathy towards every character. I think like you can feel empathy in a way where like the core definition is just to like understand someone's feelings, like, and
Yes,
you know
yes.
and just be like, okay, I understand why you feel that way. It doesn't mean you have to like agree with it.
Hun-
And
100%, because like it's just a, and maybe again, as you said earlier, maybe satisfaction is not the right word, but it's the satisfaction of being like, I hate this guy, but also I get, like, I understand the logic. I understand like
mhm,
I understand why a person like him would react this way in this moment, and it feels completely real. It
mhm,
feels completely authentic. And so like it's almost more like you, in some cases it's more like you empathize with the writing, because you empathize with like
mhm,
why that person is behaving the way they're behaving, more so than like you empathize with their actual choice,
mhm. Yeah, because I still like, okay, like I understand what makes you feel this way. Like, also you're being like a petulant child who is like just completely like, if at the very best you are like starved for attention and like don't respect your wife's career, like at the very best.
Yeah.
Like but then like, yeah, but then it obviously could be like, you know much worse, where you're just like this like empty shell of a person who just like craves enjoyment and like does not care about any like social issues or anything.
Yeah, and I don't want to be an empty shell of a person who craves like tragic outcomes for, the characters in this show, because I don't. But like in Rogue One, when she's standing around that war table, Mon Mothma, like, where's this husband and daughter? Don't get me wrong, it's not like I expect them to be standing around the table with her, and they very well may just
Mhm.
be back in their like palace on Coruscant. But like part of me thinks like Mon Mothma doesn't get to where she is in Rogue One. They don't have to die, but I bet there's like a real. But I'm
Mhm.
serious though, because like that is the easy like, oh well, in some situation occurs and they die, and then she just is able to dedicate her life to the cause because like her family's gone. Like
Mhm.
that could happen. I think more likely like
Mhm.
she loses them, like they're gone, like they're like, all right, deuces, like we're out, like, and they're completely gone in
Mhm.
that way. um you know or they could end up in a situation like that arrogant a-hole imperial dude from today, like his wife and son
Mhm.
have guns to their head, and they're bound and all that stuff, like they're you know they could Mon Mothma's husband and daughter could find themselves in a situation like that at some point, I'm sure, because of her. There's all kinds of ways it can go
Mhm.
badly for them or for her, but I guess I'm just saying, like, by the time this show is over, I don't think she's still living at home with a husband and a daughter. you know that'd be my guess.
Yeah, I mean, man, every like alternative is like potentially fascinating there
Mm-hmm.
because like,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like it's just I mean, it's so it would be like so cliche for them to be like I maybe not cliche is the right word, but it would be like the convenient and like the obvious thing to have them like executed by the empire, or whether, like however it goes down, if it if that's the empire's intent, or if they're caught in the line of fire, or whatever else, like that would be kind of the most like on the nose. And then she's like, now I'm like even more inspired to the cause. um and I think that that could still be good because of the complex complicated relationship that they have. Because like I think it's one thing to in like a in a medium, like a storytelling medium, to you know kill off someone who's important to a character, um as part of that character's journey. If they and usually it is the case where they're like, this is the person I love unconditionally more than anyone else. And so this is going to hurt that character the most. Kind of thing. But because it is like kind of fascinating, because like I don't even know if that's like if they'd want to like explore that story, like, you know. I mean, yeah, that's one direction. Or I think like the kind of like separation, or like divorce, or whatever, the going back to Adam Driver, like the marriage story part of it. I think that could be like a really fascinating story for her, because like she is this like you know one of the pivotal figures of the rebellion. But like I don't think it's as simple as like, yeah, but she's a bad mom. Like I don't think it is that simple. I think it's like she just lives a challenging and complicated life. And again, she is another hero who's a liar in this story. And
Yeah,
like
and like,
no,
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was just
Well,
in
I
that
was just gonna
conversation.
uh she's a hero who's a liar, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, was just my final
Oh yeah, of course.
point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was just gonna point out like how unfair it is the way her daughter treats her. I feel like like I I love that scene. I think it's really well written, but at the same time, I'm like, man, she doesn't. She really doesn't point out like how just unfair her daughter's treating her. You know, she's like, oh, well, that's hurtful. You know, and the daughter's like, well, that's just, you're just making it all about you. And she's like, I feel like in that moment you say, no, I wanted to take you to school, or like I want to spend time with you. You know, and it's like you're just doing it to
Mm-hmm.
show off for other people. I don't know. Maybe the intention of the writers is to make us think like that really is what Mon Mothma is doing. You know what I mean? Like she really cares so much more about everything else going on in her life that she is only making time for her daughter when she thinks it's, you know, like necessary so that she can maintain the, you know, the image of this happy family or whatever, because that's good for her
Mm-hmm.
overall image, or you know, something like that. I don't know, maybe that is how they want us to view
Yeah.
it, maybe that's the case, but I just kept thinking like, come on, man, like you you're not defending yourself well enough here. Like, I want to defend you, Mon Mothma. Let me jump in and defend you to this daughter, because I just don't think it's fair. And I also thought the dialogue from the husband there, the one line when he's like, "We've got to clear it with her," or whatever, you know, I was like, no, he did not just say that. Like the daughter was like, "Oh, are you taking me? Are you still taking me, or whatever?" And he's like, "We got to clear it with her." I was like, oh my god, like in so few words, it just so clearly established
Mm-hmm.
like there's two sides in this family, and she's the only one on that side. Like we are teamed up against her totally. It was so
Mm-hmm.
brutal. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we are like, it's getting late here. It is a weeknight. We should wrap up. We cannot possibly end this conversation without talking about Cyril back at mom's place. Like, that I
Eating.
think was just one of the pivotal scenes in this show where I'm like, this is nothing I ever expected to see from a Star Wars show, but it
Yeah.
it works. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she slaps him in the face and then immediately starts sobbing. You know, that right there is
Mhm.
like, there's layers in those five
Whew.
seconds for that character.
Mhm.
You know, the mom cares more about, you know, Cyril's reputation, or she's so angry that, you know, he embarrassed her, or is not kind of coming through in the way that she wants him to come through, because of like a lot of the dialogue seems to be about like, oh, this is what we need for our family, or this is, you know, we're going to talk to this uncle who's going to call in a favor because this is what our family
Mhm.
needs, or whatever. It's very clear that like a lot of this is like selfishly motivated on her part. Like she wants to climb in some way or achieve in some way through her son's achievements. But then also you know, she starts sobbing and she hugs him, and it's like, yeah, there's a complex relationship between those two characters, mother and son. But
Mhm.
like, when is there not a complex, you know, relationship between mother and son, right? And so, man, like that feels authentic. When there's all this rivalry between them, but then also clearly some real love there. Like, you could have come visit me. I had a spare room. You never came to visit me. You know, little lines like that, little moments
Mhm.
like that. Um, yeah, so good. And there's also excuse me, there's also just, there's shots, like there's a shot where he's just sitting on his bed in his mom's house, like looking out the window, and just like tears
Oh.
streaming down his face, and
Mhm.
nothing, nobody
Mhm.
comes in, nobody says anything. It's just a moment of atmosphere, or like the character development there, where you just see like how broken he is by what happened. And let's not forget that in the fourth episode, like whoever that lieutenant or captain or whoever he is, the guy that basically fires Cyril and the other dudes, um, you know, he flat out tells him like, your screw up, your decision to go after this when you were told not to, like the calamity that occurred. As a result of that, this whole planet is no longer under corporate authority. The Empire is taking over. Like your little stunt resulted in a complete change of power on this planet. And man,
Mhm.
that's a colossal screw up on his part. And yeah, you know, we kind of check in with him. I think in the fourth episode and the fifth episode, not today, right? I don't think you see Cyril at all today in the sixth episode,
No.
but it's just all about like the shame that he's feeling as a result of what he screwed up, which is, you know, pretty huge.
Yeah,
And he eats Cocoa
it's
Puffs with blue milk.
yes. Yep. Man, I think like again, just like going back to like that empathy comment, um like that dude sucks. Like I mean, like his the things that he does, and I would say like his beliefs, um in his beliefs in the context of um the galaxy's power. Like he's, like you compared him to like a Blackwater merc. And um like their organization, like that's those they're not doing good in the galaxy. But they're but then his like when you kind of like so like what he's aligned with is bad, and like the things he's had to do there are to get there is were likely bad. And and to like never see that, like to be so blind to like the obvious like suffering that he's causing other people is also bad.
Yeah.
But then he has these like these like core just like human beliefs where he's like, these people who are like on my team, who are part of this like group, this organization, were killed, and like again those people were bad, um and they were not good people. um but he has this belief like they were killed, and you're not going to like do anything about it. You're going to just like sweep it under the rug, and you're going to lie about what happened. And like, and I think that like that part of the belief is, I don't know, it's neither like, you know a binary good or evil. But it is like, I think rooted in something well meaning, and like that was like having like an effect on him. Because like I think like, yeah, part of it was like, yeah, I can be like, I think there is always just a part of him that's like, I could be a hero, I could like get a promotion kind of thing, um in there. And there may even be lines about that, I don't remember. But like I do think he had like this core belief in like a justice, and like, and I think like also just like respecting and honoring these people who died, that like that drove his actions. So again, just like a very complicated character.
My sense regarding Cyril is that he, I think I guess you could say he believes in order, but like, I don't think he's really motivated as far as like his service to pre-core, whatever it's called, like the corporate sector or whatever it is, right? The security forces of that
Hmm.
corporate sector. I don't think it's morally motivated really at all. It doesn't feel like it to me. What it feels like is he wants to prove that he can be great and that he can accomplish great things. And I think wherever he was or whatever opportunity was provided to him was like, okay, here's an organization in which you can climb the ranks, and it is a structured organization. And if you make your bed tight enough, and you put enough piping on your uniform, and you stand up straight enough,
Hmm.
and you make sure your paperwork's turned in on time enough, and if you follow all the rules enough, etc., if you do all those things, you can achieve greatness. I think that's the part he believes in. I don't even think it's really like, I almost feel like if it was like a super moral, like, heroic organization, he would behave and act the exact same way, and probably
Mm.
just have the same level of allegiance to it. Because I don't think, at least so far, I don't get the sense that he's motivated by necessarily like a desire to control other people or to have more power, like in a any evil mustache twirling kind of way. I think he just is very insecure, or has a deep need to prove and I think that's why they've made his mother an important character in the show too, is because like you're seeing what is the source of his need to prove, right? His source, the source of his
Mm-hmm.
need to accomplish something. I think that's really what it's all about. And so, um, yeah, I mean, he goes like he knows that he's part of this corporate security organization, and so they're going to enforce their corporate security and do whatever. And yeah, he does bad stuff, and like he's not a good dude. I'm not saying he's a good dude, but also it's just like sometimes the villains are villains because um that is the method that they are choosing and involved in of achieving whatever goal it is they
Mm-hmm.
want. And sometimes a villain's a villain because a villain craves like you know a selfish evil or whatever. And I don't think he's that guy. I think he just wants to climb that ladder. You know what I mean? Let's put it this way: he could climb the ladder working for a benign capitalist, uh, corporation, or he could climb the ladder
Mm-hmm.
working for what I would consider to be a less benign capitalist organization, like a defense manufacturer, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't want to get too like whatever, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
like an organization where we'd say, "Well, I have ethical issues with this organization's existence, and them being more successful is bad for like whole pockets of the planet or pockets of the population." I don't think it matters
Mm-hmm.
to Cyril. He'll climb that corporate ladder and become CEO of good guy corporation, neutral corporation, or bad guy corporation, as long as he's climbing that
Mm-hmm.
corporate ladder. You know what I mean? I think that's what it's about for him. Which is, I mean, that's really interesting for a villain or a character occupying that, bad guy side of things in Star Wars.
Yes, and I think all of that is true, but there's also like this like I don't want to, like, I guess the best way to say it is sensitive side, in like he is extremely sensitive.
Yeah.
Like there are like moments where he's getting like berated at different at different points in the series, and like you see like his eyes like welling up with tears. And
Yeah.
I think there is like that sensitivity that like also I think he weaponizes his sensitivity to like this like hand of justice, where like yes, he's motivated by his like, you know, climbing the ranks and stuff, but like also like he doesn't know how to process like deaths of people that like could have been him, or deaths of people that like are, part of this organization with him. So he just like, you know moves to this like revenge um kind of plot, or like a justice plot, because like he doesn't know how to like process that. And then like again, like that scene in his like old bedroom at his mom's place where he's just like crying, like, is like this is all, he's not like, I think there's like people who do, try to um gain power and status, and like oftentimes they are like just stone cold, like they're, you know um just vicious and cold, and they do not feel things. Like I think, I mean, it's like, like how we describe like sociopaths, like they don't feel things, they lack empathy, and as they're like, you know willing to do whatever it takes to like achieve their selfish goals. And I think with him, like he's just like, he has like this drive and this motivation, and like in equal parts he has like so many feelings at the same time. And it's like, and I think that's what makes him a like just fascinating character, because it's like how do you reconcile these two like parts of you that are just like so diametrically opposed. And like that is, I think he's definitely one of like the wild cards in this series of like, and I don't, I again, like this show isn't dealing in absolute, so I don't know, like I can't say like, oh, he's gonna stay a bad guy or he's gonna become a good guy. I think like again, he's gonna be somewhere in the middle through, that's going to be his arc in the show, because like all of these characters kind of just exist so close to each other in like the middle of morality.
Yeah, and seeing the ways in which they eventually intersect is going to be a super interesting. Um,
Mhm.
so I just have to give. We should probably wrap it up here. I
Mhm.
have to give a shout out to two. There's more fantastic lines of dialogue, many more fantastic lines of dialogue.
Mhm.
I have to give a shout out to two brilliant lines of dialogue in the show from these last couple episodes. One is when Vale tells and Cassian, they're talking about why Lieutenant Gorn is, helping the rebellion or whatever. And she explains the story about him falling in love with the Aldani woman and then like losing her and the Empire's involvement in that. And then she says, everyone has their own rebellion. Man, what a
Mm.
fantastic line, and sort of a mission statement or a kind of like um, umbrella, kind of statement for this show, right? Like everyone has their
Mhm.
own rebellion. That is, you talk about like concise and efficient writing, but still really
Mhm.
powerful and moving. Fantastic. And then the other one from Nemec. Um, oh, what is the line? Oh yeah, surprise from above is never as shocking as from below, or something along those lines. Basically, that
Mhm.
um, when that Tie Fighter cruises over them, like he says like, well, we're going to teach the Empire that surprise from above is never as shocking as surprise from below. And considering the way this show has emphasized, or this show believes in like the everyday person and their ability to accomplish things, and really kind of like is critical of and skewers some of these powerful people for the way they dismiss the little person, right? Like Mon Mothma's husband, oh, like doesn't even want to bother to know the driver's name, right? Or
Mhm.
the Imperial officers on Aldani who talk about the stench of the people who live there on Aldani, or even the sorry, I forget the character's name, but the character that's on the bridge, talking to Gorman, and Gorn, Lieutenant Gorn, and says like, "Oh, can you imagine like 500 of these people here or whatever it is? Can you imagine that many Aldani's here? Like, ugh, God." And he's got like a little smile on his face, like saying to Gorn, like, "Can you imagine that? Ugh, it'd be the worst." And Gorn is like,
Mhm.
"Yeah, I can imagine it." And it's just so clearly again
Mhm.
like that line of like some of these people look down on everyday um, human beings, normal people. And obviously this is a show that really is like, it's not telling stories about the royal family or the Jedi or like whoever it is. It's not concerned with that. It's These are just everyday people, you know who are working to make a difference. And so um, uh, the villains or the characters we're less empathetic for, or the characters who are representative of the sort of wrong side of history, are consistently condescending and dismissive of the people who are ultimately going to change the course of the galaxy, right? And so,
Mhm.
yeah, I love that. And again, a line like, you know, um, the one from Nemec. Surprise from above is never shocking as surprise from below is such a brilliant distillation of the values of the show.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That is that is so good. Yep, and that kind of, I mean, that kind of sums it up. And I would love to just kind of put a bow on it with that quote, but I just remembered another great line from an episode full of great lines, and that is the exchange you'll hang for this.
Oh,
At 7 years serving you, I deserve worse than that.
yes. Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, no, that's a good one too. And I'd love to put a bow
Mhm.
on things with that one, but then I remembered that the four-armed doctor who tries to save Nemec's life, I think his name is
Mhm.
Dr. Quadpaw. Is that right? Is it Quadpaw? It's something like that. It's something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's still Star Wars. Yep. Just in case you forgot, we're still watching Star Wars. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, should we call it there, Ryan? Should we wrap it up there?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. We'll
Yep.
we'll close out the show there. Three fantastic episodes, another brilliant arc. I'm really excited for next week's episode, which may be less of a first part of 3 episode arc episode and more of an outlier. So it'll be really super just interesting to see like kind of what that
Mhm.
looks like and where we'll be and where's Cassian going? Like, I have so many questions. I'm wrapping up the show, I promise, but I have so many questions now at the end of this episode.
Mhm.
Like, where's Cassian going? I assume Val and Luthen and, especially Val and Luthen are going to be connected to Cassian going forward. So how are they going to come back together?
Mhm.
How does Bix get back into the mix? Is Cassian potentially
Mhm.
going to be going back to Ferrix? To where his family is. I want to see more of his mom as well, right? So Marva. So
Mhm.
there's so
Mhm.
much there, and then also the first 3 episodes, Cassian was really motivated by like I'm trying to find my sister, and that has sort of been dropped in these 3 episodes. But that's got to be something we're going to return to, right? So yeah, there's just a lot on the table left to explore here in this first season of the show, and
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's plenty of content there, plenty of questions that I think the show I don't want to say has to tackle this season, but I feel like is
Mhm.
very much probably going to tackle this season. We only have 6 episodes
Mhm.
left, and again, like the show kind of takes its time and develops
Mhm.
things. Makes those deposits before cashing the checks. So
Oh
that's a
yeah.
lot to probably try to get through in the next 6 episodes. So yeah, really curious to see how that is all going to happen. I don't know when we'll be back with another episode. Next weekend, Ryan, I will be at Universal Studios in Florida. So might
Mm.
make it tough for us to record next week. So maybe it'll be the weekend after we'll come back and do a show, maybe about, I don't know, episode 7 and 8. Um,
Mhm.
or maybe we'll figure something else out. I don't know. But in
We'll
any
see.
case, we'll be back
Mhm.
relatively soon with another episode about this brilliant show or other things. Who knows what else might happen in the meantime?
There
Um,
there is nothing else. There is only Andor.